Today we're going to be learning Chagigah Daf Tet Vav. We're going to finally get to the fascinating Elisha ben Avuya stories. But first we're going to finish with Ben Zoma. So we're going to start at the bottom of Yud Daled Amud Bet with a very strange sugya. I should give you a little bit of a warning, some graphic material. So Sha'aluet Ben Zoma, they asked Ben Zoma the following question. Bitula she'ibra mahu lekohen gadol. If you have a virgin who is pregnant, can she marry a Kohen Gadol? A Kohen Gadol is not allowed to marry a woman who has slept with somebody else. Now, this woman is pregnant. On the other hand, she claims to be a Betula, a virgin. So the question is this: are we concerned for what Shmuel says? I could sleep with a bunch of women. I could have sexual relations with women without actually having blood come out. In other words, I can sleep with them without having them tear their hymen, right? Their signs of virginity, which means that this woman, if we're worried about what Shmuel says, that he knows how to do this in a particular way, are there other people like him? In which case, maybe she is what we call a bi'ula. She's had relations and therefore would be forbidden to the Kohen, even though she might still be technically have her virginity. Odilma, and again, it's a matter of how you define virginity. Odilma de Shmuel o shchicha, or do we say it's very uncommon that people do this and therefore we're not really concerned for this possibility? In which case, maybe she really is somehow pregnant without actually having had sexual relations with someone. Amar lehu de Shmuel lo shechiach. Ben Zoma answers, Shmuel, it's not very common. And therefore, Chayshinan shema ba'ambati ibra. It's possible she got pregnant from a bathtub, meaning there was a man bathing there before her. He had his semen come out into the bathtub. It entered into her body and she became pregnant from that. So then they say, wait a minute. How could that possibly be? If you don't have the semen come out in a very forceful manner, well, it's not going to get her pregnant. So here, the semen went into her body not very forcefully because it kind of went in the bathtub. So they say, no, it's not a matter of it going into the woman's body with force. It's a matter of it coming out of the man's body with force. So it could have come out of the man's body with force, in which case it would have been potent enough to be able to get into her body and actually impregnate her. Now, you might think this Gemara sounds a little bit absurd, and could this really be possible, right? So whether it could be possible or not, right, seems highly unlikely, even if it is maybe possible. However, this has very interesting ramifications. This, again, it's the sugya that's used in talking about artificial insemination and all sorts of other methods of women becoming pregnant without actually having sexual relations. And in terms of the legal status of the child, of, all sorts of things are really dependent on this sugya. So it actually, even though it sounds like a very far out there sugya, it actually is very relevant for modern issues that come up in this sense. Tanu Rabbanan, next story with Ben Zoma. Rabbi Yoshua ben Chananya, Shahaya Omer al Gav Ma'ala b'Har HaBayit. He stood on a step in the Har HaBayit. Okay, this is the regular Rabbi Yoshua. V'ra'ahu Ben Zoma, and Ben Zoma saw him v'lo amam milefanav, and he did not get up out of respect, even though Ben Zoma was supposed to get up out of respect for Rabbi Yoshua. He was his elder. Amar lo me'ayin u'la'ayin Ben Zoma. So says to him, Rabbi Yoshua says, by the way, I want you to note, Rabbi Yoshua is standing in this situation, and Ben Zoma does not stand up for him. We're going to have a lot of standing and sitting in today's stuff in different stories. Says, where are you, right? Your head's in the clouds, Ben Zoma. What are you thinking about? So either he's saying it in a derogatory manner, which I think it is because the story particularly tells you that he didn't stand up for him. Also, he might be just asking we're obviously thinking about something. You're engrossed in your thoughts. What are your thoughts? Amarlo. He says, I was looking at the upper waters and the lower waters. And I saw the width of 3 fingers is the exact difference between the upper waters and the lower waters. How do I know this? It says in the verse, the wind of God the Spirit of God was floating on top of the water, which must mean the Spirit of God is right underneath or is part of the upper waters, and that's over the lower waters. And merachefet is like kiyonah, merachefet al baneha, like a dove that's hovering over her children. Ve'ena nogat, and isn't touching. That's about 3 fingers, the finger widths. Amar lehen Rabbi Yoshua letalmidav. Now Rabbi Yoshua doesn't even turn to Ben Zoma. He turns to his students and he says, Adayim Ben Zoma bibachutz. Ben Zoma is still on the outs. He doesn't really understand things properly. He's clearly wrong about this. Some people say that it's not Adayim Ben Zoma B'Bachutz, which means he's still on the outs. It's he's already out. In other words, Adayim B'Bachutz means he's kind of not yet in, right? He doesn't really understand things fully. At a certain point, he'll get to that point. But he's already out, right? We saw the Ben Zoma, what happened, right? He came in and he went into the Pardes and he got injured. So this is after he's injured, right? He clearly is in a different place and doesn't understand things properly. Michtiv, he's going to explain why he was wrong. That happened in the first day of creation, that sentence. Havdalah, but the separation between the upper and the lower waters was only b'yom hasheni, in the second day. Hudahavai. It only happened in the second day. So it can't possibly be that from the pasuk in the first day, we're already learning about the distance between the upper waters and the lower waters, when in the first day it was just water. There were no upper and lower. Right? It says in the second day of creation, they separated between the waters and the waters. So there you have it. He was obviously wrong. Vikama. So how much really is there? How much space is there? Now I'm going to have a bunch of interpretations. What we do with this, I don't really know. It goes back to all the Maaseh Bereshit questions about not fully understanding them. Like a hair's breadth. Okay, just the thickness of a hair is what's between them. They're much closer than 3 finger widths. Sorry. When you put beams on a bridge, so you put them right up against each other, so the spaces between them, there's a little bit of natural space. That's the amount of space. You put 2 talises, one on top of the other. There's basically no space. That's the way the upper and the lower waters are. Some people say like 2 cups that are put on top of each other, whether they're inside each other, right? I thought maybe it means one is almost inside the other, or whether one is on top of the other. And again, there's a little teeny bit of natural space. What would be the difference between all these? It's not really so clear. Acher kitzetz benitio. Now we get to Acher. Acher is another word for Elisha ben Avuya. We'll see from a story where he gets his name from. Not his name, Elisha ben Avuya, but why he's called Acher, which means another. Kitzetz benitio, right? It's like they don't want to say his name because he's such a bad guy that they don't even want to say Elisha ben Avuya, and they call him Acher. He was kitzetz benitiot. Okay, he uprooted the roots, right, or he cut into the roots of the pardes, and he basically uprooted the Torah in the process. Alava katuv omer. Okay, the pasuk says about him, and we have to read the whole pasuk here. Okay, we'll have to read these verses. I'll pull them up for a second. But this is very important because it's not so clear really what these verses mean. Okay, but we're gonna see how they translate these psukim. Okay, no, it's not here. Okay, we're in Kohelet, chapter 5, verse 5. Al titena picha lechatia besarecha. Don't let your mouth bring you into disfavor. Ve'al tomar lifnei malach kishkagahi. And don't plead before the malach, the angel, to say, this was a mistake, I made a mistake. Lama yiktsof Elohim al kolecha. Right, but fear God, else God, I'm reading in the Sun-Fri translation, else God may be angered by your talk. And he'll destroy your possessions or your maaseh yadayim, your actions, what you've done. So we're going to have to see what this is. We have somebody talking, then they made a mistake, and the angel isn't going to accept it, that it was a mistake. And then God's going to get angry, and he's going to basically wipe out his maaseh yadayim, which is going to be his good deeds. So here goes our story. Mahi, what is the story about? Or this pasuk, what's the story behind this verse? So Elisha ben Avuya, when he's in the Pardes, he looks up in the heavens and he sees an angel. Angel Mitatron, who's in charge of, he's given reshut, okay, it was given permission to sit, okay, and generally angels don't sit, we're going to talk about that. He was given permission to sit in order to write down the zchuyot, all the good deeds of the Jewish people. Amal gemira delamala lo have lo yeshiva velo tacharut velo oref velo ipoy. Elisha ben Avuya says, you know what? I learned about the way the angels are in the heaven. And what I learned is that there's no sitting. There's no competition. There's no back because they have 4 heads. Remember from Yechezkel and the Maaseh Merkavah, they describe these angels as having 4 heads. And there's no ipoy, there's no ayefut, exhaustion, there's no fatigue, which means the angels don't sit. They don't get tired, so they don't need to sit. And it also said no yeshiva. So he sees this angel who's sitting. He says, something's up here. Amal, Shema, chas v'shalom shtei reshuyoten. Maybe there's someone else besides God. Maybe he's on the level of God because God sits on his kisei kavod, the throne of honor. So maybe there's another angel like God. And that's always, right, the danger of believing in two different gods. So the reaction in the heavens was they took Metatron out. Pulsa denura is always this fiery hitting that they do to people. And they hit him 60 pulsa denuras, okay, punished him in front of everybody. And as a sign to show Elisha ben Avuya, this is not God, because God wouldn't get punished. But Elisha ben Avuya doesn't get the message. Okay, and he doesn't say, oh, I guess there aren't shtei reshuyot, there aren't two gods. So, Amar le, my time ki chazite lo kamt mikame. First, they asked Metatron. You were supposed to be paying attention, just like Ben Azai wasn't paying attention and didn't realize. I'm sorry, Ben Zoma wasn't paying attention and didn't realize. Rabbi Yeshua was there. He should have stood up for him. This angel wasn't paying attention, and Elisha ben Avuya was watching, and he should have immediately gotten up because when humans see you, you can't be sitting down. So that's why he got punished. But in the end, the real issue here is that Elisha ben Avuya doesn't come back, right? He doesn't be chozer b'tshuva, right? Realize his mistake. And he now has the rights, okay, by God, and this is what the verse was talking about, that Elisha ben Avuya spoke and said, maybe there's two reshuyot. The angel, you can't claim to the angel it was a mistake because he didn't change his mind when he realized the mistake. And it says God gets angry and takes away your maseh yadayim. Now, Elisha ben Avuya, all his actions get taken away. Basically, everything good he did in his life is wiped out. Yatzta bat kol v'amra, here's the famous line. A heavenly voice comes down and says, Shuvu banim shovavim, all you wild, wayward children, come back to God. Chutz me'achel, except for Elisha ben Avuya. He is not accepted back, even if he does tshuva. This is going to be an important line, and we're going to see this a number of times. A reference back to this story. Amar hu il v'itchedahu gavra me'ahu alma lepuklitani b'hai alma. So Elisha ben Avuya hears this, and he says, you know what? Okay, I have no chance anymore. I may as well go and enjoy the world, right? Until now, I've been keeping mitzvot because I thought maybe, I'll get olam haba. At this point, it's clear I'm not getting it. Well, I may as well go out and do whatever I want. So nafak acher l'tabut ra'ah. He went out to do all sorts of bad things. Right? First things he does, nafak ashkach sona. He finds a prostitute. Tava'ah, okay, he asks her, can you sleep with me? She looks at him, she says, aren't you the famous Elisha ben Avuya rabbi? Right? Rabbis don't come to me. Like, this must be some sort of mistake. He pulls out a turnip or a radish from the ground, and he gives it to her, and it's on Shabbat. So he shows her, I could care less about Hilchot Shabbat. Amra achelhu, she says, this is obviously someone else, obviously not Elisha ben Avuya, and now you see where he got his name Acher from, right? Or at least it seems like it's possible she's the one who gave him the name. Sha'al Acher, you might complain, you might say, well, the story happened before where it said everyone's accepted except for Acher, and there he had his name. But again, the story could have been referring to what he was called later. Sha'al Acher et Rabbi Meir, la'achar she'yatzah l'tarbut ra'ah. After he goes to Tarbut Ra'ah, he basically leaves religion. He asked Rabbi Meir the following question. We're going to have a lot of conversations with him and Rabbi Meir because Rabbi Meir was a student of his, and they kept up a very good relationship all these years. So Acher says to Rabbi Meir, Amar le, my dachtiv gam et zelu umatzeh asa Elohim. Right? Also this, and opposite that, right? God did something else. So how do you understand that pasuk? It sounds like, right? There's good, there's evil. I don't know, something. Let's see. Amar lo, Rabbi Meir says to him, everything God created, he created a counterpart. Okay, now it's not an opposite. We're going to see. Bara harim, bara gavaot, bara yamim, bara naharot. Okay, he built big tall mountains. He also built small mountains, right, hills. He built water, right, big pools of water. He also built small streams. Okay, big ones, little ones, right, all those types. But it's not opposites. It's bigger and smaller. So now, Amar lo Rabbi Akiva, Rabcha lo amalkin. So says to Rabbi Meir, but Rabbi Akiva, your rabbi didn't say this, okay? You're saying things that's not the way your rabbi explained them. So now I'm going to explain to you how your rabbi said it. Ella, para tzadikim, para risha'im. No, Rabbi Akiva put it into, there's good people and there's bad people, right? It's almost like Elisha ben Avuya is saying, I know I'm on the bad side, right? There's the good side, there's the dark side. I'm on the dark side, and I know there's the dark side, there's the good side, etc. Okay. I'm just checking one quick thing. Okay, so now, okay. Bara Gan Eden, Bara Gehenom, right? There's Gan Eden, and then there's Gehenom. There's hell on the other side. Kol echad ve'echad yesh lo shnei chalakim. Echad beGan Eden, echad beGehenom. Everyone has the potential, right? They have a part in Gan Eden, they have a part in Gehenom. Zachat tzaddik, if the tzaddik, a righteous person, he's worthy. Natal chelko ve'chelek chavero beGan Eden. He not only gets his share in Gan Eden, he can pull his friend with him because he has influence on him. You can have an evil person and he could pull someone down with him. And then he's going to get a double portion in hell because he brought somebody to hell with him. Right? It's almost, you can almost feel the tension between Rabbi Meir and Elisha ben Avuya, where there's this potential that Rabbi Meir could pull him to the good side. And there's the potential that Elisha ben Avuya can pull Rabbi Meir to the bad side, even though this clearly doesn't happen. But I think that this conversation is referencing the possibility. So now, Amar Rav Misharshia, where does this come from? This is just an aside. My ka'a, where's the verse for this? In their land, they will get double the portion, they will inherit. They're going to get destroyed double the power. So here you see that there could be a double share, which is depending on whether you've pulled someone to the bad side or the good side. Another conversation they had after Elisha ben Avuya left. It's not worth the value of gold or glass, or the value of, or its counterpart is like this fine gold. Okay, it is not like that. This is a reference. What really seems to be bothering Elisha ben Avuya is the glass, because gold and fine gold, the paz is fine gold, are very valuable, but glass is not as valuable. So he says the Torah is hard to acquire, like klei zahav and klei paz, because they're very expensive. But nochin la'abdam ki klei zchuchit. Here he's clearly referencing Elisha ben Avuya, that they're very easy to destroy like glass vessels. They can break very easily. Okay, whereas it's very easy to lose your Torah, like glass can break very easily. Amar lo Rabbi Akiva lo amar kach. He says, Rabbi Akiva, your rabbi didn't say that. Elama klei zahav klei zchuchit af al pi shenishberu yesh lahem takana. Klei zahav and klei zchuchit, even though they break, you can actually fix them. Af talmid chacham af al pi shesarach yesh lo takana. Likewise, very interestingly, that Elisha ben Avuya is saying this, the talmid chacham that goes off the way has a way to be fixed. Amar lo, right? Just like the klei zahav and the klei zchuchit. So Amar lo, afatach chazor b'cha. So it's the perfect opening for Rabbi Meir to say, so great, come back. Why are you staying so far? Amar lo, far shamati me'achorei pargod. I already heard it said from behind the wall in heaven, right, or behind, right, however you define exactly what pargod is. Shuvu banim shovavim chutz me'achel. Okay, someone wrote me that there's a reference, I'll quote by name, Jonathan ben Ezra, that there's a reference. Acharei pargod comes up in the El Ezkira, the story about the 10 Arugei Malchut, that it was heard Acharei pargod. That there's certain things that are sometimes heard from there. There's this connection. I haven't figured out what to make of it, but I will mention it. So I heard from Acharei pargod. It's basically from the scene in the heavenly sphere that I heard. Shuva banim shovavim chutz me'achel. I said we're going to keep hearing this quoted, right? I have no hope, basically, so it doesn't pay. Don't bother trying to convince me. Tanu Rabbanan, Maaseh ba'achel shaya rochev al asus b'Shabbat. Very famous story. He's riding on a horse on Shabbat. Haya Rabbi Meir ma'alech acharav lemod Torah mipiv. So you have this scene on Shabbat. He's riding on his horse. Rabbi Meir is walking after him, learning Torah from him while he's riding his horse on Shabbat, which is obviously forbidden. V'haya Rabbi Meir, amar lo Rabbi Meir, chazor la'acharecha shekvar, amar lo, Meir. Elisha ben Avuya says to Rabbi Meir, Meir, listen, chazor la'acharecha, turn around. Why? Shekvar shi'arti b'ikvei susi ad kan tchum Shabbat. I was measuring with my horse steps, right, with my forbidden horse that I'm using, but I measured with it, which you're not allowed to do on Shabbat either, to measure, but I've measured, I guess you can count steps. I've counted steps, And I've noticed that we've gotten to Tchum Shabbat. You're outside the 2,000 cubit limit and you can't walk any farther. So you better stop right here. Amar le, afatach hazor b'cha. So he makes this reference, says, you need to turn around. So Rabbi Meir says back to him, you need to turn around, but not physically, but spiritually. So now, Amar le, v'lo kvar amarti lecha, didn't I tell you already? Kvar shamati mecholei pargod, shuvu banim shovavim chutz me'achel. Right? Didn't I already tell you that I heard it said up in the heavens that no, right? I have no choice. I have no chance. Takve aile the Beit Midrash. So Rabbi Meir won't give up. And he pulls him into the Beit Midrash. You're going to see how far Rabbi Meir goes for the rest of his life. Okay, to basically bring Acher back. It's very tragic for him. So he says, come with me into the Beit Midrash. He pulls him in. Elisha ben Avuya comes into the Beit Midrash, sees a kid learning. He says, please tell me your pasuk. What are you learning? Amar lo, ein shalom amar Hashem l'rishayim. There is no peace, God said, for the evil people. Obviously, this is a message to Elisha ben Avuya. Right? He wasn't very happy in that Beit Midrash. He goes to another place. Amar le liyanuka psokli psuka. Amar lo, ki im techapsi benetel v'tarbi lach bori nichtam avonech lefanai. You can clean yourself with whatever cleansing detergents you want, but your sin is stained and there's nothing you can do about it. Okay, this is clear message Elisha is getting. Every place he goes, you are not accepted here. He goes to a third place. Amar le liyanuka, turning now to Amabet. Psokli psuka. Tell me your pasuk. Amar le va'at shadud mata asi. You're a robber. What can you do? You're a bad person. You could try to dress yourself up as much as you want. You're still not going to look beautiful. Okay. Again, don't bother. There's no hope. It goes to 13 different Beit Knesset. All of them basically gave him psukim like this. Lebatra, the last one, Amarle, he said to him, Psokli pusukach, in the 13th place he got to, he said, tell me your pasuk, Amarle ve'lerasha, Amar Elohim, Mali l'saper chukai. To the Rasha, God said, why are you talking about my Torah, my laws? I don't want to hear you talking Torah, right? I don't want to know about this. The last one is the most painful one because all the while, he still wants to learn Torah, right? He still engages in conversation with Rabbi Meir. He enjoys learning. He just doesn't want to keep Judaism, right? He doesn't believe, but he likes the Torah. And here this says, I don't want to hear you talking anymore. Not only was it bad enough, the content of this one, but this child had a bit of a stutter or didn't pronounce his words carefully. Sounded like he said, not le'rasha, but le'elisha, God said. And then he got very insulted. So, Ikad Amre, there's two endings to this story, two different versions. Okay, one is much more severe than the other. Some say, Sakina Hava Bahade, he had a knife with him. Ukra'e, he tore up this student into pieces. B'shadre le'tles arbe kniste, and he sent him around to the 13 shuls that he had visited. I assume that means the 13 shuls he visited. This sounds like a takeoff on Pilegesh Begiv'ah from the end of Sefer Shoftim. If you haven't read that story, you can read it. Pretty horrible story. Also, someone gets cut up into 12 pieces and sent around to the different tribes. The Ikad Amre, this is 13, that's 12, but still it's a very similar story. Ikad Amre Amal. Some people say, no, he just said, if I had a knife in my hand, I would have torn this kid alive. Okay, so now we get to the next story. So that's the end of that story. However, the story really ended, so we don't know if he murdered this child or didn't. When he died, Ambre, they said up in Shamayim, the question is, what do we do with him? We're not going to judge him and send him to Gehenom, but we're also not going to send him to Olam Haba. So we're basically not going to do anything with him. Because he learned Torah. Okay, even though they said in the story they wiped out all his zchuyot, I guess that was to prevent him from going back and doing tshuva. But the truth is, he learned Torah all his life. And but he sinned, so he definitely can't go into the world to come. Amar Rabbi Meir is still worrying about him. He says, better that he should be judged, and eventually he'll get to Olam Haba. In other words, judge him in Gehenom. His sins will be wiped out, cleansed out, and then we can send him to Olam Haba. So Matai Amud ve'ela Shami Kivro. When am I going to die? And when I die, I'll go up, I'll plead a case for him, and I'll make sure that smoke comes out of his grave, and the smoke will be the sign that he went to Gehenom to basically burn off his bad deeds. And in fact, when Rabbi Meir died, Salik kutra mikivrei da'acher, smoke started rising from his grave. Now, you would have hoped that the smoke would stop, and eventually he'd make it to Olam Haba, but that doesn't really happen. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, a bunch of generations later, Rabbi Yochanan comes and says, Gevorte lemikla rabbe. This someone like Rabbi Meir was so strong that he was able to burn his rabbi, right? He caused his rabbi to basically burn. He caused the smoke to come up. He says there was a Talmid Chacham, in other words, he starts describing what happened. There was someone who was a big Talmid Chacham, Elisha ben Avuya, among us, and we didn't manage to help him, right, to save him. If I could just grab him by the hand, I'd lift him up out of hell. I could do it. Who would stop me? So Amar, Matai Amutz, he says just like Rabbi Meir, when will he die? When will I die? I want that smoke to stop. It's bothering me that he's just been burning all these years, right? He should get out. He has good deeds that he's done, and he learned Torah, and that should protect him. And in fact, when Rabbi Yochanan died, Pasak kutra mikivrei da'acher. The smoke stopped smoking up. Okay, there was no more smoke. Apparently, he was actually able to save him. Patach aleu saftana, the eulogizer for Rabbi Yochanan, said, "Afilu shomer petach lo amad lefanecha rabbeinu." Our rabbi, even the guard at the gates of hell, wouldn't stop for you. Okay, you basically were able to get past him and pull Elisha ben Avuya out of hell. Very fascinating. And to the story kind of puts Rabbi Yochanan in a very strong position, right? It's unclear exactly what to say about Elisha ben Avuya. It sounds like he was sort of just taken for the ride. And especially we said he really had no hope. And then yet in the end, he did somehow have hope. So anyway, all sorts of interesting things to think about. His daughter now goes in front of Rebbe. She says, listen, I need money. Okay, remember, Rebbe was Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. He had money. I need money. Please help me. Amarla, she says to her, Bat Miyat, who you're the daughter of. Amralo, Bito Shel Acher, I'm the daughter of Acher. Amar la, Adain Yesh Mizaro Ba'olam. He still has children living in this world. V'haktivi, it says, and the beginning of the verse is all about Rishaim, and they don't really get anything. And then it's actually the pasuk before. It's the pasuk in Eov, and then it says Lonim lo velo neche ba'amo ve'in sari b'megurav. He doesn't have great grandchildren. He doesn't have grandchildren. Right? There's no. A rasha basically cuts himself off from the world and leaves nothing behind. So how could it be? Amra lo zechor leTorah tova al tizkor ma'asav. Right? She keeps saying, just like the other stories, right? Remember his Torah and not his bad actions. Okay, he does have something for him, right, to go for, something to support him. Miyad yarda esh v'sichsecha saf Rebbe. When she mentioned the Torah of Elisha ben Avuya, a fire came down, right, the fire of learning of Torah, and singed the bench of Rebbe. Bacha v'amar Rebbe started to cry and said, those who disgrace the Torah like this or abuse the Torah, the ones who praise the Torah and do the right things with Torah, could you imagine all the more so the power? Like, look at the power of this person who condemned the Torah. Here, right, have much more power to those who praise the Torah. Now we get to the biggest question, which is how could Rabbi Meir have learned Torah from Acher? We learned this in Moed Katan. My dichtiv ki siftei kohen yishmuru dat, v'Torah yivakshu mipiu, ki malach Hashem tzvaotu. Okay, the lips of the kohen will protect the Torah, will protect knowledge and Torah. They will ask from his mouth because he's a malach. He's an angel of God. Im domeh harav lamalach Hashem tzvaot yivakshu Torah mipiu. V'im lav, yivakshu Torah mipiu. Right? If he's like an angel, then yes, you should go learn from him. If your rabbi's not like an angel, don't go learn from him. Amar Rish Lakish. Rabbi Meir cha eshkach v'darish. He found a pasuk and he darshaned it, a different verse. Later we're going to have to say, how do we resolve the contradiction between these verses? Hat oznecha ushma divrei chachamim v'libcha tashit l'da'ati. Listen, hear what the rabbis say, but then go with me. Now, me, it says, L'datam lo ne'amar. It doesn't say go in their ways. It says, Ela l'dati, go in my ways, which is God. So there you see, listen to what the Chachamim say, but don't necessarily go in their ways because they might not necessarily be in the right way. Rav Chanina brings another similar verse. Amar mehacha, Shim'i bat ure'i, hati oznech, v'shechechi amech u'beit avich. Listen, my daughter, turn your ear, but forget your nation and forget your family because, right, listen to them, but then go do something else different from what they do. So that's how he learned it. He could learn from him, but not necessarily do as he did. So now they say, well, kashu kraya hadade. The psukim contradict. The first one said you have to be like a malach Hashem. So the answer is, lo kashya haba gadol haba katan. If you're young, then you have to follow only when he says, right, when he's a malach. But if you're older and you're able to distinguish, like Rabbi Meir was, then you can take some and not the other, and then you can listen and learn Torah even from someone who doesn't keep mitzvot. Ki'ata Rav Dimi Amar, Rav Dimi came, he said, Rabbi Ma'arava, Rabbi Meir achal tachla ushada shechla levara. He ate the fruit and he threw the pit out. So in other words, he took part of what Elisha ben Avuya had said and he threw out the rest of it. Darash Rava, my dichtiv el ginat egoz yaradati lirot bi'ibei hanacha. So here's a pasuk in Shiur HaShiurim, which they're going to say references the Talmidei Chachamim. Lama nimshalu Talmidei Chachamim le'egoz. Why are Talmidei Chachamim compared to a walnut? Lomar lecha ma egoz ze afal pisha meluchlach betitu b'tzoa ein masha b'tocho nimatz. Right, it has a shell around it. So even though the outside is filthy from the dirt and everything else around, but the inside is not destroyed. Right, the Torah is protected inside. It might be he's bad on the outside, but on the inside, his Torah is still solid. Rabbi Bar Shila meets Eliyahu, and he asks him the following question. Amarle, isn't that your big question, right? What is God doing up in the heaven? And he's basically quoting passages that his rabbis are reciting. Okay, so he's basically quoting all sorts of halachas here from rabbis. But he will not mention any Torah that Rabbi Meir says. Now that's very harsh because we've been learning Rabbi Meir's Torah all along. We even say a stam mishnah without a name is usually Rabbi Meir. We're constantly quoting his Torah. So hold off. Amar le amai. So he says to him, why doesn't he quote anything from Rabbi Meir? Because he learned from Acher. Eliyahu says that's why God is not quoting anything from him. Amar le amai. He says, what? Rabbi Meir limon matzah. It's like he found a pomegranate. He ate the inside. He threw up, right? The outside's the bad part. He took only the good from Elisha ben Avuya. So what's the issue? Well, apparently this was a convincing argument. Amar le. See, so now Eliyahu says, I guess you're right. Hashtakamar. Now I hear God saying, Meir b'ni omer, Meir, my son, said, Bizman she'adam mitzte'el shchina ma lashon omeret. When someone's suffering because they did bad deeds and now they're getting punished, what is the Shechina saying? Kalani meroshi, kalani mizchoi. Right? Oh, in my head, right? Look what I did. I created this thing, my head, with my arms, and now, right, I'm sad for look at what I created, right? This is like a parent sad about where their children got to, like, what did I create? I created a monster. But sad about for himself and sad for this person. Right? If that's how he feels when evil people, could you imagine all the more so for righteous people? Eshkach, right? Appropriate that Rabbi Meir said this, right? Because he saw that there was this place for compassion even for Elisha ben Avuya, right? Even though maybe others had given up on him, Rabbi Meir still felt that, right, it's still Ma'aseh Yedei HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and it's still someone who's a Talmid Chacham who you can learn from. Shmuel finds Rabbi Yehuda crying on the door, the bar of the door. Amarle Shinina, that was a term of endearment he used for Rabbi Yehuda. Mai kabachit, why are you crying? Amarle Mi zutra mai dechtibu b'Rabbanan. Is this right? Is this a small thing? Like this is pretty big. It says ayesh sofer, ayesh shokel, ayesh sofer tamigdalim. I'm crying over this pasuk. Where is the sofer? Where is the right? Where is the counter? Where is the measurer? Where is the one who counts the migdalim? Okay, which are like big buildings or something, towers. Ayeh sofer, what does this pasuk mean? Shayu sofrim kol ha'otiyot shebetorah. Where are all the people that used to count letters in the Torah? Ayeh shokel, shayu shoklim kalim v'chamurim shebetorah. Where are all the people that are weighing the kal v'chomers in the Torah? We have all these kals and chomers, and we have hard mitzvot and lighter mitzvot, stronger, heavier mitzvot, more important. Or the ones who are just doing all these kal v'chomer and learn drashot. Ayeh sofer et hamigdalim. This is a hard one to understand. Shayu shonim 300 halachot b'migdal poreach ba'avir. They would learn 300 halachot in a migdal that's floating in the sky. Some people say this is migdal Bavel. Some people say this means about a migdal that's in the sky and that's kind of not on the ground. And what about tuma and impurity? There's a body in a migdal. This is a whole halachic issue. It's unclear. There's many, many different interpretations of what this means. But Rabbi Ami says the following, that Rabbi Ami said, they asked Doeg and Achitophel, who are both characters who appear in Sefer Shmuel, they asked these 300 questions. They were apparently huge Talmidei Chachamim. It says in Sanhedrin, there's 3 kings. This is in the parak of all the people who have a place in Olam Haba. There's lists of people who don't. There are 4 regular people that don't have chelik in Olam Haba. And among these people are Doeg and Achitophel. Even though they were big Talmidei Chachamim, they do not have a place in the world to come for sins that they did. So Ana Matahavi Alan, if they left the path, well, where does that leave us? Right? Rav Yehuda says, it's going to happen to me too. These guys were bad from the beginning. They had something off about them from the start. And that caused them to leave, right? They had some doubts. They had this. Okay, that's the issue. You're fine. Don't worry about yourself. Acher mai. So now, if we're already at the story, well, what about Acher? What was wrong with him? What turned him off? He was always singing these Greek songs. Okay, so it sounds like maybe Gentile influence, right? The Greek Hellenistic influence on him. Possibly it was the music that kind of pulled him away. Okay, maybe not the content necessarily. Maybe it's not significant. It was Yevani, Greek specifically, although it does seem that way. Different commentaries. A different example, a different reason. When we talked about standing and sitting, when he would stand up to leave the Beit Midrash, he probably came in hiding his books. He had these apicorsus books, okay, heretical books. And when he got up, he forgot he had them, and then they fell out. Okay, so he would stand up. They were in his lap, and he would stand up, and they would fall out. Okay, so he would basically sneak these books into the Beit Midrash, and that's what caused him to leave the way. Last part for today. Sha'al nimus hagar diet Rabbi Meir kol amar denachet liyores salik. Anytime you put the clothing in a dye, will it definitely take? Okay, you put a Talmid Chacham in the Beit Midrash, will he definitely go the right way? Amar le, Rabbi Meir answered, it depends. Okay, and I think he learned this lesson from his life. If you take the wool from a very young sheep that it's fresh from its mother and it's nice and white, that's like the best wool, then it will work. But if you don't take him when he's clean from his mother and it's not clean to begin with, then lo salik, it's not going to work. So he's basically admitting that Elisha ben Avuya must have had something from the beginning that prevented him from learning Torah properly and taking it to the right place. So we have a lot here. The Yerushalmi has lots more stories about Elisha ben Avuya. There's some other stories in other places. You can look it up. You can Google all sorts of stories of Elisha ben Avuya and find them. In any case, this was a start. It was very interesting, and I hope you enjoyed. Have a great day, everyone. And don't get any bad ideas from today's class.